Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and Rick and Morty Season 4 is back with Episode 6, Never Ricking Morty, an episode designed to make every social media story structure analyzer feel f***ing stupid.
You're 14, you watch videos of people on YouTube reacting to f***ing YouTube. I'll be the judge of when we get too meta.
For anyone who thought they had a high enough IQ to keep up with this runaway train of an episode, welcome back to Ricksplained, our cringy titled Rick and Morty after show, where we do our best to understand what the hell is going on this show, along with some special guests from it. Our frame-by-frame breakdown of all the hidden animation jokes is coming in a separate video, so that you can feel like the story lord of our comment sections, which I'm sure you already are because half of you assholes comment on this video before watching it to this point. This episode is titled Never Ricking Morty, a nod to the never-ending story, a film about a story within a story in which the meta outer frame story layer leaves the inner story with lesser stakes, aside from when they drowned a goddamn horse in a swamp. The Rick and Morty writers wanted to explore an idea of an anthology, a collection of non-canonical stories within a meta-narrative. But because this is Rick and Morty, the writers parodied the very concept of anthology by representing it as a runaway train that Morty and Rick are trapped on by its evil conductor, the Story Lord.
It's not a real train, it's a story device. Literally. A literal, literary device, quite literally, metaphorically containing us.
The way Bong Joon-ho used a train as an allegory for a capitalist society in Snowpiercer, the Rick and Morty writers, Jeff Loveness this episode, the guy now writing Ant-Man 3 for Marvel, and the guru in every room he's in, Dan Harmon, they use a train as an allegory for the craft of storytelling. The writers themselves are narrative adventurers trapped on a runaway story train of a freewheeling TV show, trying to regain control of it, but failing and eventually surrendering to that failure.
I think it's going to be a favorite episode of mine, but I'd be the first to say, like the story train itself, if it got away from us.
To understand this episode, it helps to understand the difference between a linear story and a circular story, as defined by Dan Harmon's story philosophy. Harmon is a follower of the philosopher Joseph Campbell, and he adapted Campbell's story philosophy into the famous Dan Harmon story circle that you've probably seen before. It's broken up into 8 story beats, and Harmon's obsession and discipline over this circle has helped make shows like Rick and Morty and Community so great. Many sitcoms are linear, a predictable A to B trip where not much happens each episode. But good stories have curve. They're circular, taking heroes on full life's journeys before returning them back to their homes, but with new thematic outlooks. Harmon's circle even shows up in this episode when Rick figures out what's going on.
Oh, of course this thing is just a circle. You'd think it was so goddamn complicated. Okay, here's where the stupid vignettes were. God, imagine if that had been the whole thing. So now we're here, and the engine must be here. I'll have to rig us a couple of spacesuits that start failing around here so we can pay a heavy price for re-entering at this threshold.
Those vignettes were in step 2, need, where the crisis and the hero's goal is established. Dumb anthology train, Rick wants off. Rick's joke about the vignettes being the whole episode is the writers snarking that other animated shows never progress past 25% of what Rick and Morty typically do. For a lot of shows, the vignettes are really all it is. But now they're on step 3, titled Go, in which the heroes enter an unfamiliar situation, aka where Morty and Rick are now. And they now use the circle to foreshadow the rest of the episode, the complicated take step in which the heroes pay a heavy price, and the engine room located at the final change step where the hero transforms his outlook. Each train car is a different anthology meta storytelling format. Stories from a bar, Christmas tales, a VR game at Blips and Chits. We move from car to car when the characters step out of that meta format and reveal it as a frame. The air inside the train is breathable continuity, the connective tissue between these stories to keep them all within a narrative. But outside the train is narrative chaos.
Don't worry, Morty, nothing out there is canon.
That includes fan-servicey Rick and Morty dream pitches that remind us to never trust a trailer, a battle with Evil Morty and armies of Meeseeks and Gazorpazorpians, the return of Snowball and Tammy, all non-canon. Rick's attempt to write the train is to try to fix it with a Bechtold test, the feminist criticism that some storytellers find reductive since its rules alone don't make a good story. Similarly, Dan Harmon has admitted that his early attempt to address feminism on Rick and Morty, the female-dominated planet Gazorpazorp, was his least favorite episode. The only way to truly stop the train is the discovery that all heroes' journeys are at their core the story of Christ. And realizing that your story that you think is so unique is really just a veggie tale, that's a bummer.
She leaves so blue she don't know what to do.
As anyone who has seen or done a crappy improv show can attest, bringing in Jesus grinds everything to a halt and makes you wish that instead of carrying you on that beach, he was burying you underneath it. This episode's final reveal, the change step, shows that the victory is merely taking place within another meta-narrative device, kind of like that lame twist ending of St. Elsewhere, it's all within a child's toy. Here, Rick delivers the episode's true cynical message.
God, I love money so much, Morty.
You being sarcastic?
Merchandise, Morty. Your only purpose in life is to buy and consume merchandise.
The twist-filled curved journey on this story train remains one trapped on a track, not in control of its own destiny, but repeating in endless loops. It's incapable of true change or synthesis because its objective is just to make money. Just like how the Rick and Morty writers feel that despite their bold, innovative storytelling, their sole purpose is to sell merch for their media company overlords at Adult Swim, Turner Broadcasting, Warner, and AT&T. Merch is the true profit of these animated TV shows. It's a sick, endless cycle of commerce that, I'm part of. As Bong Joon-ho taught us in Snowpiercer, the train is life. And in Never Ricking Morty, the train is the life of the writers. An endless spiral of unconstructed story ideas and pop culture nods that all tied together into a sophisticated but kind of hard to follow critique of narrative itself. An upward coil? Or a snake eating its own tail? Or just a vehicle for jokes about gutters?
Morty, gross.
That's what people call them.
Gross people. I don't want to have to picture so watery in such volumes that, hey.
Yeah, I'm betting gutters will be the Pickle Rick meme we get from this episode. Is this Ricksplanation legit? Or as you trash commenters concluded the moment you clicked on this video, le shit. Well, let's bring into this after show chat a couple second opinions. Joining us now are Rick and Morty voice actor and voice of Mr. Goldenfold, Brandon Johnson. Thanks for coming back, man.
Good to be here, man. Always excited to do the show.
Hell yeah. And joining us also is Rick and Morty superfan and, according to his resume, former and future gutter, Tommy Bechtold. Welcome back.
All about getting shredded and then getting wetted, baby. Let's go. Let's go.
God.
These gutters are ready to be filled.
This train has already left the station. Guys, I feel like this episode started with the premise that I understood. I had a good handle on it, but then it might have moved a bit too fast for me in the middle. It lost me, but then I found it again by the end, which maybe was the design of it. I want to know from you, what point do you lose this train, and at what point did you feel like, oh, I'm back on the train?
I think for me, as soon as I gave up trying to really follow it, and I started to just really enjoy the jokes and the visual sight gags, I kind of fell back into following what was going on. It was one of those things where, like, you can only, like, escape if you relax, like, you relax your body. Like, it was like, I had tried so hard, I was thinking so hard how to follow this episode, and then the second I gave up, I was able to follow what was going on and enjoy it, so.
Did you say the only time that you can escape is if you relax your body?
Yeah, have you heard, like, when you want to get ropes off, if you, like, magicians do that, they have to, like, relax their wrists to get the ropes to slide off? I have taken a lot of people prisoner, Brandon.
Well, I'm glad you're the one taking prisoner rather than being taken prisoner.
That's right.
Although, I don't know if I'm actually glad about that.
I feel like every time the three of us do this show, I admit to some sort of heinous crime. Horrible crime.
You really go for it, because you're like that dad that gives advice, but it's crazy. Like, hey man, I hear those bullies are bothering you at school. What you need to do is counterfeit some money, because I was counterfeiting money, and then hand out those counterfeit bills to those kids. That's my advice. Because that escape advice you just gave me, I'm like, we know too much.
Good, thank you.
With this episode, like, I don't know if you guys felt this way. It seemed like the writers understood their own structure so inherently in the way they outlined these episodes that they were moving so fast through it that they were just kind of like expecting us to be along for that ride without giving us any time to catch up with them, which, I don't know, I kind of appreciated like my intelligence just being trusted. How did you guys feel about that?
It's interesting because Rick and Morty is in a unique position where they have to laugh at themselves, and they sort of have to make sure that everybody knows that they don't take it seriously, because that's their brand. Their thing is I'm not really, I know my shit smells. So I feel like this season, what we've seen them doing is making fun of anybody who thinks the show is God.
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel that way. It's like they were very aware of the fans, even more than usual this episode. They were teasing all these like dream plots. They were calling them non-canon. We saw like a return of a Meeseek army of Evil Morty. There was this lightsaber duel with Tammy, and Bird Person was in a musical. Like these are all like episodes that fans have been like desiring for so long. Which of these episodes do you feel the most bummed to learn might not be an episode now because it was teased here?
The Bird Person musical being burned like this really bummed me out. I was rooting for that one to come on. I think any sort of musical for them. I mean, the original songs that they do, like what was it? Was it 2 seasons ago? They had the Jermaine Clement kind of like Space Odyssey, or Starman parody that was so good. Like they're obviously so smart and so creative. Like a song of an episode of all original songs this season or next season would be something I'd really look forward to, and I hope they did not burn that, but with the Bird Person musical.
It's interesting that we burned all of the potential X's that Rick might have. It's always something that I pushed for when I was in the room for the brief amount of time that I was in the room. I was like, is there not an X we can dig up? Because sometimes you run out of story ideas and you come into the room and you're like, okay, so Morty has this, and they're like, canon. And you're like, okay, canon. Okay, well then Rick goes to, and they're like, canon. and sometimes they even do it so that they could save it for a later season. So I really feel like they've given it their best, and they are fishing, but because it's a talented writer's room, they're great. They're catching fish.
Yeah. You know, I love seeing them go through these like alternate story pitches because it feels like they're not being precious about anything. They're like, yeah, we know you want an Evil Morty return. We got something better planned. Like, we're not just going to give you exactly what you want. We're going to give you what we think stories need, which is like complexity and like philosophy and spirituality. And yeah, we'll make some jokes about like gutters, which I have to ask you guys about this because this season we've seen shy pooping. We've seen like weird dragon sex orgies, and now we have this weird it seems like the writers are like, yeah, we're gonna do some complex storytelling, but we also want to ask, is this weird thing like what's going on here? Let's go into the ditch here. What gross stuff do we want to see explored next, or do we think they're gonna ask next?
I actually think that like what they're doing, in my opinion, is they're kind of parodying the way our culture now has become almost idiocracy, like obsessed with poop and like profanity. Like if you think about like little kids, there's more like poop themed toys for little kids in the aisles of Target and Walmart than there's ever been. But then they go into the My Special Time storyline to pass the Bechdel test thing, and it's like they do the like most safe, unoffensive period themed like little vignette that they could possibly do, like basically being like, we have no idea how to write for women. We have instead of just being raunchy, overly gross men, we're just going to act like be completely oblivious to how this all works. So I think it's kind of like the fact that it's even a little dirtier this year is more of a like almost kind of a like comment on society being like, we've all gone a little bluer, but we can still be smart about it.
Yeah.
Also, you've got 2 teenage boys that created the show.
Right. Sure.
So once they exhausted the poop realm, you knew damn well that Titty Twister is the next show.
Yes. Just watch that Justin Roiland cartoon from the Hilarity for Charity special, and that's all you need to know. Like, have you ever seen that? What is it, the Charity Brothers?
I'm a fan of. I'm a bigger fan of Mr. Sprinkles.
Oh no.
That's a dark one. That's a good one. I also love that they nodded to the massive amount of merchandising that the show is responsible for. I mean, you can buy any sort of toy, any sort of blanket. In the Rick and Morty offices, when you walk in, there's stacks and stacks and stacks of things that you would never think they'd give licensing for. Like, there is a Pickle Rick.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like, that's it's kind of sad and cynical that that's the station they arrived at the end of the episode, but like I can imagine those writers feeling that's the darkest truth of this show, that like, no matter what they think this show is actually a vehicle for like philosophy or science fiction exploration or comedy, it's actually like its biggest impact on society might be that it's just a vehicle to sell toys, clothes, merch. And like ultimately that's how their overlords see this show, is this has been the most profitable thing for many of these people's careers, is just to show that like they're able to sell anything in association with Rick and Morty.
I always try to tell actors when they talk about how much they love their career and the craft and all these things, I always say, remember that you're here so people can have sex. They need a dark room to sit in for 2 hours to contemplate how they're going to make their move. And then once they leave the movie, that's the get down. And then the same thing with a comedy club is like, they come to the comedy club, they drink, they sit next to each other, they laugh, show each other their teeth, then they leave and have sex. So you can't really be precious with what we do.
It's a point that every artist eventually arrives at. Like, I feel like, you know, Warhol, Picasso, all these guys eventually are like, oh, wait, my final stage of evolution is realizing that I'm just here to make money for people. And then like artists like Banksy are like, they've turned that into their entire identity of like, you, people are trying to sell my art. You try to sell my art at an auction, I'm gonna shred it the moment there's a purchaser for it. And I feel like that's what Rick and Morty is doing now. They're like, all right, you're gonna try to sell this? We're gonna make this the most disgusting thing that you try to sell. We're gonna talk about gutters an episode. We're gonna talk about shy pooping. We're just gonna make the show we want, and you still have to sell it, AT&T. This is what you're now trying to sell to kids. Have fun with that.
Also, what a takedown on workout culture, just to insult every person in shape on that show. Nice gutters.
I was walking by the artists when they were drawing this episode, and they pulled me over, and they were like, look at this. And I was with Nick Rutherford. We were coming back from the kitchen, and we looked at Jesus with the insane gutters, and I looked at him and I said, man, if only I had enough to fill those gutters. He put his arms around me and he said, let's get you back into the writer's room where you belong.
If anyone could do that, it would be Jesus. Jesus could help you. He could turn just a little into enough to fill the greatest of gutters.
That's also a really interesting part of this, is that Loveness was raised very religious. And this is
I was going to say, yeah.
And this is his episode. You remember, you worked with Loveness at Kimmel, right, Tommy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I did.
Good guy.
So you know this about him too, is that he comes from, they're not fundamentalists, I don't think. I think they're just religious.
I think, and he went to Bible camp and everything as a kid.
So I really like that he was able to incorporate that into the episode. Mm-hmm. And I think at least that's what you should do if you've had to be religious all your life.
I think it does it smartly too. It's like, it's obviously ridiculous, and it's it's obviously pointing to the kind of hypocrisy and strangeness of religion, but it's not taking the easy, obvious shots at it that have been taken for, since movies and TV have been around. It's almost like it's more taking shots at the people who continue to say this stuff, and that it's not poking fun at Jesus, it's poking fun at the idea that Jesus is a 6'4" white guy who weighs 185 pounds and hasn't eaten a carb in 31 of his 32 years.
It's also great because
except for once a week when he eats his own body.
I like the idea that he's also shitting on the people who wrote the Bible as a fellow writer. He's like,
yes,
talk about canon.
I would like Jeff to write a Bible. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. What would you put in your Bible?
My Bible? Mostly recipes, apple crumble recipes, basically pie-based desserts.
That's an interpretation of the Bible that we haven't dug into yet. I feel like if you read every other word, you're going to find a recipe for, I guess cannibalism, right? Isn't that what? That's one take.
Sure. I think microbreweries, there's certainly a small batch distillery option there with the water into wine.
Guys, this whole episode of Ricksplained has gone through those stages of story evolution, right? Like, we went to the darkest depths of talking about cutters, and now we've evolved to the final station of, Christ has arrived, he's come again to bring us back to morality, thank God.
I can tell that you have never, ever read a Bible. Because you said Christ
I've
arrives.
had it read to me. I like a good Catholic. I don't read it. I just have someone explain to me what it is.
Yeah, you have someone shouted at you for an hour once a week.
Yeah, now that's what I do. Don't watch these episodes of TV. Just have me yell at you what it means. That's what this is all about. No one consumes. Perfect. People consume the consumption. Oh, boy. Wow. Guys, this has been a fascinating episode. I want to thank our guest, Brandon Johnson, for coming back to the show. It's awesome having you back. So good to be here. Thank you so much. It's great to see you guys amidst all the chaos that's in the world. Hell yeah. And thanks as always to Tommy Bechtold. We'll entrap you and get you arrested eventually. Oh, no, not me. I know how to relax and escape. I'm too big to get out of frame. Reminder to all of you watching, you can get early audio versions of the show by subscribing to the Ricksplained podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on social media, follow New Rockstars. Subscribe to this channel for more Rick and Morty coverage. Reminder that our breakdown of all the hidden animation details, the jokes, Easter eggs, that's going to be a separate video. It's coming out next. And we'll close out this week on our favorite joke this episode. Roll the clip.
I guess I'll return it.
Return? Are you insane? Did you hear nothing I said? Buy another one, Morty. Consume, Morty. Nobody's out there shopping with this virus. Where's your wallet?